Well, I've got a few more parts for the Starlet, so we're going to give it a bit of a sort of mini service. There wasn't much history when I bought the car, basically, and judging by the look at some of the components from the outside, they certainly don't look like they've been replaced any time recently. So basically what we've got is a new set of ignition leads, set of spark plugs, a distributor cap and a rotor arm. So we'll be doing an ignition service on it, and we'll have a look at some of the old components when they come out to see what they're like. I'll time lapse it because I'm sure you guys know how to service a car, but if there's anything sort of interesting or any sort of details, I'll show a bit of live footage and we'll go from there. Okay, so I've run into a problem straight away. The spark plugs I've got are a different number, and as you can see from this, they're also a different length. So the bottom part of it looks to be within a millimetre, but at the end of the day you don't want the electrode sticking any further in case the piston hits it. And if you look at the top of it, this new plug is about 5mm shorter than the old plug. Yeah, that kind of sucks. I mean, the old one that came out of it, the part number is BCP R6ES, and that's an NGKR. Doesn't look to be too great a condition, but I mean, at the end of the day, the tip of it's sort of brown. It's a bit sooted up, but I mean, it hasn't really been driven. It's just been sort of like started up just to keep the injectors going, really. And the new one is BKR5, so it's a different heat rating already. So 5's different to 6, obviously, on the heat rating, and then EYA. Okay, so just a quick update. I went online after I'd tried to change the spark plugs yesterday, and every application guide that I checked showed that these were the right plugs for this car, and the ones that were in it weren't listed for it. No matter how many guides I checked, those ones weren't listed for this car, and these ones were the ones listed for it. So I've put these in now, and you can get the HT leads to reach it, so that's okay. They're a different heat range as well. Like I say, these are a 5 heat range where the others were a 6 heat range, so these will sort of keep more heat in the plug kind of thing. So I haven't actually run it yet, but just I've put those plugs in. Okay, so one tip about putting spark plugs in is to obviously help prevent cross-threading. What I usually do is turn the spark plug backwards, sort of anti-clockwise, until you feel the spark plug sort of drop into the first part of the thread, and then when you tighten up, you know you've lined up the thread. So I just turn it backwards till you sort of hear it click and pop, and then you can turn it back in. There we go. Okay, so taking the old distributor cap off, and also pulled out the rotor arm as well. But I just wanted to show you the amount of rust that's on the end of that coil pin. That's not going to be good at all. So that's supposed to be transmitting the spark from the coil to the distributor cap, which then goes around into the center of the rotor arm, and it's then sent out down each wire as it rotates. So yeah, that really doesn't look good. I do have a spare coil which I was going to save for another day because I didn't think it'd be this bad. But yeah, that is proper crusty there, and I can't really see that's going to be helping with any sort of spark or energy transfer at all. So yeah, it looks like I'll go and get the coil, and we'll change that as well. Let's have a quick look inside the distributor cap as well. I mean, I'm not too sure how much you're going to be able to see this, but the posts in there are horrendously crusty. I mean, there's tons of sort of ash and deposits on them at the point where, you know, sort of pick off a pile of sort of white powder that you can see that's now fallen in there. And yeah, there's plenty of oxidization and plenty of oxidisation and God knows what going on inside there. So yeah, this thing was definitely due. Sort of, let me try and balance the torch. Horrendously crispy and crusty. I mean, look at the lovely condition of that stuff falling off. So yeah, that can't have been helping. So let's get this all knocked out, and hopefully she'll run a bit better. That's the other thing as well. I took it off the car complete, basically. So I took the distributor cap off, but I've left all the old plugs on there. I mean, thankfully on this one, it's actually got where they go. So I've got a 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's actually on the cap. So that's pretty good. That actually tells you where they go, but I don't think the new one does. So this is a Denso. So this is, again, probably the original cap. And judging by the amount of crust and filth and God knows what in it, it's not been changed for years. But yeah, take it off, obviously, with all your plugs. Thankfully, the plug leads themselves are all a unique length. So obviously the shortest one goes to the closest cylinder, and then obviously the longer ones go further along. So this end of things is fine, but to try and get the right end on this, on the distributor, if you've taken it all off, you can figure it out, I'm sure, from the book, but I always leave it here, so then I've got the new version I can set up compared to how the old one was made, and that's not a problem. Like I say, I don't think the new cap's actually got these numbers on it. Okay, so finally managed to get the coil off. What you've got to do is sort of undo the wires that connect to it, but you need to obviously make a note of where they go to. So on the, well, we'll call it the left-hand pin as you're looking at the end of the distributor, or the one closest to the front of the car, the radiator side, it's just a black wire. And that black wire comes from part of the igniter assembly that's also in there. The other side gets 3 wires attached to it. You've got you've got a black and yellow wire, or sorry, black with the orange or brown trace, and that comes from outside. There's a wire outside from the distributor, and that goes across to the other pin, and that seemed to go on first. Then you've got a brown wire coming from the condenser that's hiding at the back there, so then you've got another brown wire on that. Then you've got a final brown wire coming from the igniter assembly again, and that goes over to the other side. I've left the rubber gasket that goes between the coil and the distributor cap on. It appears it's either there was some sort of silicon sealant around the back of the coil to obviously seal it to the body here that I've taken off, and either that's been used to bond this gasket sort of in place here, just behind where the screw goes through, or there's some sort of rubber boss that's part of this that's then pushed in. It's quite old, it's not particularly brittle or anything, but I didn't want to pull it to sort of snap it off, so I've managed to do it by basically lifting it up a little bit like an elastic band and then feeding the coil out under it. So that's come out of there okay. It's all a bit dirty, but really that's about it. So just remember where your wires go. That's it all apart. It's going to get a bit of a clean up. Tiny bit of silicon sealant on the coil. I did notice when I went to put the dust cap on the new coil, I sort of test fitted that, and it was extremely tight. I'm worried it's going to crack or break probably when I put it back on. Yeah, we'll go from there, but that's the insides of it with the coil off, so it's as apart as it needs to get now, thankfully. The old rotor arm that came out, when it was actually fitted to the distributor, this sort of top edge of it stuck out about 3 or 4 mil, about 3 mil further than the replacement one did. Now the replacement one again is listed for the vehicle, but it's probably it's definitely a pattern part that probably fits about 4 or 5 Toyotas, and probably the difference between those 4 or 5 Toyotas is the depth at which this actually sits. It's also a bit thinner on the electrode, but at the end of the day, if you change it quick enough, it's not going to wear out any more to cause a problem. But yeah, it's sort of like the depth of it. Basically, obviously, there's a stop in the bottom of this, and when the new one was pushed fully home, it sat sort of 3 or 4 mil further down that, or it's still close enough to sort of spark to the distributor cap. But whereas on this one, the pin on the distributor cap, was sitting here and it was sort of sparking into the middle of it. When this is moved further in on the car, it may be closer to the end of the pin sort of thing, and although it is still sparking there, as this electrode sort of wears away, the spark gap will get bigger, so that's not really a great idea. So I've ordered a new one of these, again from a different supplier. This one's a Beru one. Again, it's from a big company. The replacement was a Beru one, so it's not like it was some sort of no name you've never heard of, but that one sits a bit too far in. It's probably over the years, like I say, they consolidate all the different parts where you end up with one fits all, and it kind of works for everything, but it's not right for any of them, if you know what I mean. That happens nowadays. What I'll do is I'll make a spacer piece. I mean, if I get like a small disc of plastic and then cut it to that shape, I can then sort of drop that in, so that'll end up spacing it off the 2 or 3 mil that's necessary to put it in the centre of the contact, so it's going to use up more of the potential meat that's there for when it's sparking. So okay, so found a nice sort of nylon washer, obviously, so that's not going to be conductive or anything, just some white plastic nylon, and trimmed it down, because obviously inside the inner shape of it's kind of like a D shape. Obviously there's the sort of like flat on one side, so it keys on correctly and ends up facing the right way. There's a little metal spring tab in there, so I've basically just used a pair of poultry shears to cut a couple of slivers off the side of it to make it into a D shape, and then tap it down in there. With the thickness of that, obviously it was this one, the top surface of the original one stuck out 8 mil from the dust cover. Now, and this one was only sticking out about sort of like 5 or 6 mil. So now with this sort of plastic shim in there, it now sticks out 8 mil. So that will then put the centre of the rotor arm into the centre of where the contact is. If you look at the inside of the distributor, don't know whether it's going to show up or not, but you can see that on this pin here, you can see that on that bottom pin there, the wear is right, or the sort of spark erosion is right at the very end of it, kind of thing, and adding the thickness onto that will put it in the centre of that electrode, so I'll be able to use all of that rather than just end up sort of nibbling away at the edge. They're all done. I'll take back everything I said about the cheap ass intermotor leads that I'd bought. Like I say, they're obviously slightly oversized, but like I say, once I've lubricated the ring of them ever so slightly with a bit of WD-40, they just snapped right in, right up to where they should be, and jobs are good, and basically. So there we are, high temperature double silicon, sounds good, whatever that is. So yeah, they're all clipped on, look a lot neater. Like I say, they're straight here, and like I say, the problem with it was that that's obviously the sort of weather seal that prevents moisture and corrosion developing inside the contact area of the ignition leads. So being able to, knowing that they're on there, this one happened to go in. The other 3 were a bit sort of half-arsed and half in, but the rest of them are all in now, and I'm more than happy with it. I was cursing the fact that I'd bought these parts. Like I say, it's still a bit of disappointment with the rotor arm being too shallow, but that's all fixed now as well. So just spaced that out a tiny bit. There we go. So yeah. So this is the problem I'm talking about. These rubber boots didn't seem to fit properly into there, but I figured it out. See, I've managed to get all of these ones clipped in now. Quite simple fix, really. These rubber boots here, you see there's like 2 sort of ridges to them. They're just really sort of sticky and slightly oversized. All I did really was sort of rub a tiny bit of WD-40 on a rag just around the 2 seals, and as soon as you get it lined up and push it in, it just sort of pops in lovely.